So why bird?
Oh, I love that question. I don't feel like I chose birds. I feel like birds chose me. I always tell folks, don't say I'm not a birder, just say I'm not a birder yet, because if you live long enough, birding will come for you. But I think often that's how God works in our lives is we end up in a place that we didn't set out to travel to, but because of the goodness of God and the grace of God and the way God brings things into our lives, that's where we land. So I did not start out as a bird fanatic.
Walking a path along the roots of Pikes Peak, you take a fork in the road toward the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Inside is a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and the average airspeed velocity of an unladen sparrow. In the corner table by the fire are two people. One of them is trying to do calculations, but math is not her thing. That is me, your co-host, Mandy. Welcome to Believe to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. Here at Believe to See, we explore the relationship between faith, art, and storytelling. Our goal is to connect the great story, the great stories, and our own stories so that we can better understand what it means to live with a Christian imagination. Now, if anyone is going to know the answer to the question I just asked, unless she is not a Monty Python fan, it is my guest. My guest today is Courtney Ellis. Hello, Courtney. How are you?
I am well, Mandy. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So do you know, first of all, the reference to the weird question?
I do know the reference, but I have
Okay,
to tell you, I think you and I have similar math skills. So I do not have
okay.
the answer to the equation, but I appreciate a good Monty Python reference for sure.
Yes. Also, I didn't specify if it was African or European, so I
This
don't
is
know.
true.
So I think it's an unanswerable question at this point, but I do want to introduce you. So Courtney Ellis, for the listeners, Courtney is a pastor, a co-pastor with her husband, and an author and a podcaster, a wife, a mom, and a bird fanatic. Is that too strong of a word, fanatic?
No, it's definitely a bit of an obsession. I was waiting
Yeah.
for you to come on the podcast and I was looking up the birds that are going to be in Ohio in May. So it's, we can't turn it off. I don't live in Ohio, but that's what I was looking at.
My daughter, one of my daughters lives in Ohio, so I can let her know, like, you'll be there.
Good birds
Or
in
will you
May.
be there?
I
Or
will.
you're going
I
to be
will.
there in May? Okay. So it wasn't entirely random what
Was
birds are in Ohio in May.
yes. All of
So,
them. They're all in
yeah,
Ohio in May. That's the answer.
yeah. So I invited you on the podcast because I started reading one of your books, which is Looking Up, A Birder's Guide to Hope Through Grief. But you have written, I believe this was your sixth, is that correct? And you have your seventh coming out? I
Looking
think
up
that's
was 5 and 6 is coming out.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. See,
But you
math.
can add some. That's great. Yeah.
Okay. Okay,
75
good.
books. This was yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And your next one coming up has to do with seasons. What is that one called?
Called Weathering Change, Seeking
Okay.
Peace Amid Life's Tough Transitions. And it's about
Oh, that's excellent.
change.
Yeah, I've noticed a common theme in your writing is really, it seems to be recentering on Jesus by not really ignoring or shutting out what's going on around you, but really realizing that we're in the situations we're in and we're seeing what we're seeing by design and finding God in the middle of that. Sort of what I've gleaned from your writing, even though I haven't read it all yet. So why bird?
Oh, I love that question. I don't feel like I chose birds. I feel like birds chose me. I always tell folks, don't say I'm not a birder, just say I'm not a birder yet, because if you live long enough, birding will come for you. But I think often that's how God works in our lives is we end up in a place that we didn't set out to travel to, but because of the goodness of God and the grace of God and the way God brings things into our lives, that's where we land. So I did not start out as a bird fanatic. My husband all the time says, "You were not like this when I married you." Like, I know, sweetie, till death do us part.
Yes.
But God brings new loves into our lives in seasons where we need them. And birds have
Mhm.
really been tiny ministers of hope to me since I started birding back in 2020.
Yeah, which I'm going to guess that was not a coincidence. I know because I'm reading your book that more than just the pandemic happened to your family in 2020, but was the pandemic the first part, or just sort of was it the perfect storm?
It really was. It was a combination of the pandemic where, statistically, sales of everything bird related went up exponentially during the pandemic. Everyone was stuck inside. One of the things we could safely do was look out our window and go for walks outdoors. And so people
Hmm.
started discovering what had been there the whole time, but they hadn't noticed because of busyness or distraction. So that was a big piece of it. The other piece of it was a season of grief in my life. My grandfather fell very ill, and I'm a pastor. I do a lot of work with grief and death and dying and end of life care. And despite the fact I've been at this congregation now for 11 years, and I'm no longer really burying congregants, I'm burying friends. We've walked together for a decade.
Ugh, yeah.
And it is still different when you're walking that road with someone who rocked you to sleep as a baby. It's different when it's family and when it's deeply personal. So those two things came together in this, like you said, perfect storm. Got me into birds and birding, and I have yet to look back.
That's great. Well, I will say I do love the birds, but not to the extent that my husband does. I think you beat him, pretty fair to say, but he did, like, he doubled the amount of beaters, sorry, feeders that we have. He loves the Merlin birdsong app so he can find out who's singing and try to find them. And yeah, he's very into that. And it did start in 2020. That's partially because he started working from home. And then since then, he's retired. So he's your stereotypical, he even has a cute little cap now, like a little newsboy cap. He's totally leaning into the retired. That's not a birder thing. That's just a retired man thing. Yeah, I think it's required, the little cap.
I love it.
So what did you said they were tiny messengers of hope, and your podcast is called The Thing with Feathers, right?
Hmm.
That right? Yes. Because of Emily Dickinson, of course. Actually, one of my novels, which does not have a publisher, is called Hope is the Thing with Feathers. So that's, of course, I mean, who doesn't love Emily Dickinson? Our listeners for sure do. And I would say our audience is basically, it's an audience of, I would say, noticers, because it's a mix of art lovers and art makers. And so I feel like as we've been talking, I'm sure you've been triggering some enthusiastic nods from our listeners, but even for people who make a habit of noticing for the purpose of making art or studying it or appreciating it, some seasons it's harder because, like, I know I have had personal losses. My father passed away when I was 30. My mother passed away earlier this year. Our congregation, my church congregation, has had some horrible losses just in the past couple of months. And I mentioned this to you when we were emailing back and forth. I can still remember the morning after my father died. I was annoyed at the beautiful sunshine because I it felt too bright. It felt intrusive. It felt insensitive to what my feelings were. Like it's like an interruption of beauty. So in times like those, it almost feels trivial to focus on a chickadee or to ask someone who's grieving to focus on a chickadee. How do you address that kind of feeling?
One of my favorite things about the birding practice is how gentle it is. It is not forced, it is not required, and folks say to me all the time, like, I'm not really a birder. And I was like, well, if you've ever looked out the window and saw a bird and had a moment of joy, that's the bar to entry is very low to birding.
Yeah.
And there's just this grace about it. Like, you don't have to. The birds will be out there doing their thing regardless of whether you notice them or pay them any attention or not. And so, in a season of grief, often, like you said, that beauty feels like an affront. It feels like an assault. You're like, the world should be crying with me. Why is it sunny outside? And so, to folks in those throes of grief, I would just say, you don't have to. And there may be days where all you can do is drag yourself outside and sit there for 10 minutes, and God may send you some little messengers of hope. And not because a chickadee is going to solve everything, but because they are reminders to us that the world continues, that God's grace will cover it all. During the pandemic, one of the things that brought me great hope back in March of 2020, where it felt like the world was ending, was that spring was still happening. Like, flowers
Mhm.
were still blooming. I was like, did no one tell you?
Right.
There's a virus and we're all going to die. Like, this is, and so to be able to if all you can do is drag yourself to a window for a few moments, God will use that window to minister to you. And if you're not ready and you need another day in bed with the blinds drawn, like God does not judge you for that. God is a God who, Jesus is described as a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. And
Hmm.
he never comes to us and says, "Buck up, little camper." He comes to us
Right.
and sits with us in that grief and in that sorrow. And then when we are ready for that small next step, God will meet us there.
Yeah. Actually, you just called to mind the still small voice. God is in the still small voice. Yeah, not the whirlwind. Sometimes he's in the whirlwind.
For sure. And one of the reasons birding ministered to me so deeply during my own times of grief is that, people kind of well-intentioned people will try to talk you out of your grief, or they'll try to
Uh-huh.
minimize your grief, or they'll try to bypass your grief out of their own discomfort. But the birds don't do that. And so I could go for a walk and I could cry, or I could shout, or I could just be quiet. And the birds were fine with it, and the birds were there. And they have helped me in my prayer practices when I was all out of words. Birding is a way of training your attention to notice, to see what's in front of you in these really gentle ways. Sometimes the words won't come, but I could pray with my feet and I could go for a hike. I could go for a walk and see what
Uh-huh.
God brought to me. I have a friend, Paul Wallace. He's a professor of astronomy and physics, and he always says he's going out to look for a bird from the Lord and see, what God is going to give to him. And sometimes that's an exotic, rare, amazing bird, and sometimes it is the chickadee. But there's no such thing as just a chickadee. Like, each one
Right.
is beautiful. God says, "Consider the sparrows." Jesus says, "Consider the sparrows." Consider the
Hmm.
ravens, he says in Luke. And those were very ordinary, common birds. And there's grace in that too.
Well, I love in your book, you talk about everybody has a bird, like their favorite bird, and you might guess mine is the chickadee, but it's because it was the easiest for me to recognize the song. Because it's very obvious, because that's pretty much what they're saying is chickadee dee dee. So, but I also love that we have two kinds, like there's the black cap and then I can't remember the other one. If my husband were standing here, he would tell me. But it's probably a mountain. Is there such a thing as a mountain chickadee? That's
There's several
okay.
kinds
That's
around the country, but yeah, mountain is one.
what we have here in Colorado, I would say. But yeah, they bring a smile to my face just because they look like they're wearing hats to me. I also love you have one of your chapters in the book is on the turkey vulture, and I was like, and I gotta say, I was like, wow, she's coming out with the big guns because it's an early chapter, and I'm like, ooh, a turkey vulture, but the way you describe even, dare I say, beauty, the beauty of the design of the turkey vulture and what carrion birds do for the world. I mean, they beautify the world in ways nobody else, like, go ahead, sir, enjoy your repast. But and then you also talk about the mockingbird, and I think these things that you used a phrase, training your attention, I think you said. Um, and I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying before, early in my introduction for you. I do feel like your writing kind of focuses on that. Like you're very encouraging to your audience to pay attention. There's probably a reason. Be present and look around you and see what are you seeing. But the mockingbird, we got to get back to the mockingbird because you said something in your book about them imitating ambulance sirens. They imitate ambulance sirens? That's true?
Mockingbirds are amazing. They can copy almost everything.
That is hilarious. And
They're
then
not
all
great
those
with human speech. They're not parrots, but they can capture a lot of the outdoor sounds very, very well.
makes you wonder, does the mockingbird know? Does he think there's a big bird out there that sounds like that? Like, what does the mockingbird actually know? But I love the way you describe them, like the way you describe the mockingbird being so extra and, in the person you notice when they come in the party, whether it's a good thing or not. Sorry, that's not a very nice thing to say about myself, but that's okay. But I love how you admire them, about how they don't, you were talking about the fight and the flight and the freeze responses. And obviously, most birds will fly. That's why they have wings. but the mockingbird doesn't, right? What does the mockingbird do?
I mean, they will fly sometimes, but they
Well, of
are kind
course,
of,
but yeah,
yeah, they are kind of, they're fighters. They're scrappy birds, despite the fact that they're not enormous. They're about the size of a robin. They're not huge, but they are stand your ground kind of birds. They are come at me kind of birds. And
come at me,
sometimes
bro.
that ends badly for them. The ending of the book, I tell a story of a Cooper's hawk who finally gets that mockingbird in our
Right.
backyard because he was standing his ground.
Yeah.
But yeah, mockingbirds are amazing, and they will repeat a playlist of sorts. They'll go from, the call of a white-crowned sparrow to the call of a crow to the ambulance siren, and then they'll repeat it over and over again, and they tweak it. They'll make some sounds longer and shorter, and that's all in breeding season. They're looking for a girlfriend. So it's their
Yeah.
equivalent of showing off the shiny red sports car. It's like, have you heard
Right.
my song? So
Yeah.
they're amazing birds. They're the state bird of more states than any other bird because they're so visible and they're so noisy and they're hard to miss.
It's just so funny because I can remember my mom would always get irritated at
Yeah.
them, and I think it was because she was trying to hear the other birds, and she was like, "You're
Yes.
throwing me off."
It's like trying to bird near a Canada goose, like, good luck to you, you're, like, trying to hear this little warbler, it's a honk, 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 but they'll sing in the middle of the night, which may also have been why she was annoyed. I mean, they'll start that song at 3, 4 in the morning, and you're like, "Nobody's awake, like, what are you
What are
doing?"
you doing? I'm here. I'm here. That's what the mockingbird. And I was thinking of it in terms of, Tolkien and Dorothy Sayers talk about sub creators. And I was thinking the mockingbird is like the ultimate sub creator.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little more imitativeness, I would say, than what Tolkien and Sayers are talking about. But have you found, this is just a curiosity question, are they good enough that you actually think they're the other bird? Like, are they matching it perfectly or?
Frequently. They'll fool so Merlin is that bird sound ID
Right.
app. They fool Merlin all the time. They'll say Merlin will tell me there's a blue jay in my backyard. We don't have blue jays in Southern California. It's the mockingbird who picked that song up who knows where. It's astonishing. Yeah. So you
So
always do
funny.
have to check. Are there really 15 birds in my yard, or is there just one mockingbird with a
You
really
know what?
vast
I remember
repertoire?
a few weeks ago, I think my husband picked up a bird that he was like, I don't think that bird's here. I bet you it was a mockingbird.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
They're mocking
Okay.
us too. That's the
There,
thing.
yes, they're perfectly named.
Yeah.
So do we know why they do that? And do the females also do that, or is it just the male and just for mating,
It is
like showing
primarily
off?
the males, and it is
Okay.
primarily breeding season, and that's true of
Okay.
most male birds. Most of the bird song you hear when you go outside is the male birds. The female birds tend to be much quieter, they tend to sing much less, they tend to have more muted colors, and female birds do sing, and they do make chirp calls and things like that, but the males tend to be brasher, louder, sing more often. Yeah.
Okay. So they're the musicians. Okay. To go a little bit into some of your other books, like I know I don't you can still talk about birds. It's really okay.
I can't turn it off, it's pretty
I
bad.
know. That's
Yeah.
fine. I'm sure there will be parallels. But yeah, I into what I was saying about kind of your overall theme. What I get from you is this noticing and being present. How has that shown up in some of your other writing?
Yeah, Weathering Change is the next one. It comes out in February, and that really is a book. I mean, I write the books that I wish were out there to read.
Hmm.
I look for them, I want to read them, they don't exist. I'm like, "Okay, I guess this is my job." But I've always struggled with change, and I think that's true for many of us. Change is hard. So kind of the theme of that book is change is hard, God is good, nature can help us through. So by observing and witnessing things in the natural world, how the natural world prepares for change, how it responds to change with curiosity, with adaptation, with resilience, it is that idea of noticing what's going on in the natural world as kind of a conduit to understanding what's happening inside of us and how we might be a little bit more friendly with change because life is change. Once we stop changing, we die. You know,
Right.
we change our whole and change can be something small like, it's a new school year to something huge like aging or death in the family, but we face one sociologist says we face a major disruptive event every 18 months on average. And so we need to learn how to face up to change with some courage and some resilience. And that's what the book is about.
That's interesting because you said the disruptive change. It occurs to me that usually, to some degree, it's a little bit staggered. Like
Right. You'll
this
get two in
family is
two
going.
months. and then you'll get nothing. Yeah,
Right. But also, I mean, between individual, like, so my family might be going through something, but our neighbors are not, or not, not going through something, but you know what I mean? The major disruptive change. But maybe that is part of what made the pandemic so extra, is
for
because we
sure.
all were going through it at exactly the same. And so I can remember all my creative friends and I know this was true for everyone, but especially my artist friends, when we knew we were going to have to be locked inside, we're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get so much done. I'm going to finish my novel, start a new novel. My painting friends thought they were going to start a whole new series. And no, we didn't,
Yeah.
because it's like all of our bodies and our spirits and our minds just sort of collapsed in on themselves to some degree. And that's exactly when God wants to get our attention
Yeah.
with a bird. Yeah.
Yeah. Change is inherently disorienting. And,
Hmm.
difficult changes like the pandemic, but also good changes. The birth of a baby is incredibly disorienting to a family.
Yes.
A marriage is incredibly disorienting. A retirement is incredibly disorienting. And these are all good changes.
Hmm.
So, yeah, you're right. Mostly it's spread out. Like your family, has a new baby, but the neighbors don't. And then the neighbors bring you meals. But when it's everyone all at once, like that's,
Hmm.
we've overused the word unprecedented, but
Oh my
the
gosh, so
we
tired of
go
that
through
word, but
these
yeah.
major global events, like once every 50 years there's a world war, or there's the 1918 flu pandemic. And so it's long enough in the past we don't remember how do we all do this at the same time, because
Hmm.
it's new for us. Maybe you faced it
Yeah.
as an 8-year-old and now you're 58. It's a very different situation.
Yeah, that's very true. Um, I think, the fact that God himself, the identity or the essence of God is not one, it's three, just is such a potent reminder that we cannot shoulder things solo, and that we absolutely have to have community around us to bear one another's burden. That assumes there are going to be burdens. It's a given. It doesn't say, if there's a burden, make sure you bear it with one another. No, the burdens are going to be there. And yet God interrupts it with things like, I want to say the word frivolous, but not in a negative way. Like the fact that he gives us the different, even the fact that there are multiple types of chickadees. There didn't have to be multiple types of chickadees, but that detail is such evidence of God's love for us, because he wants to delight us. And that's just him reaching out and calling us toward him. It's that still small voice. Hmm. Anyway,
Yeah,
so
for sure. And I think that's a little bit of what I write about in Weathering Change. I've taken it from, looking up is birds and grief and hope. And then Weathering Change is the entirety of the natural world. So we talk about wind and we talk about aeroplankton and mobile arrays. And, we do talk about some birds because, like I said, I can't turn it off. But this idea that when we give our attention to God's creation, when we tune into the stories of God's creation, it really does help ground us. It helps remind us of who we are, of whose we are. It helps just settle us into our spirits. We weren't designed to be screen people, and we're screen people now. And the pandemic made us even more screen people. But the kids these days will say, you need to go outside and touch grass. And it
yes.
sounds like an insult, but it also is like, put the phone down and like literally go outside and touch grass. And that's a lot of what that book is about, is when we can learn from the natural world. And the book of nature, God's book of nature is not a how-to manual. It's not a math equation. It's not 10 minutes in nature and now you're 10% happier. It's more
Right.
it's more gentle and subtle than that. But rare is the time you will go outside for a few minutes and not feel a little lightening in your spirit. Rare is the
Yeah.
time you'll observe a butterfly or a colony of ants or a storm rolling in and leave that situation unchanged. And so that's the encouragement of the book: is you're going through change. It's brutal, it's hard, we're all doing it. Go outside for a little bit and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I think about every now and then, like, I won't even realize how much I've been inside, because I'm inside. I write and I read, and that's my job. And I could do it outside, but I don't know. I need to do that more. But anyway, I'll end up realizing one of my dogs needs to go outside. So I'll take the dog outside, and I'm never not stirred by something.
Yeah.
Even if it's just, oh yeah, the the air outside moves. Like there's a
Yeah.
breeze
Or that thorny problem even muddling on all day suddenly starts to unwind itself just
loosen.
because your body's moving and you're outdoors. It's astonishing. It's like we were created for that, you know?
Maybe, yeah, crazy. And it's funny because you talk about touching grass. I love going barefoot. I've always gone barefoot. I don't go get pedicures because it's not worth it. Because you can imagine, I have hobbit feet, basically, without the hair. Don't worry, it's not gross. But but I do. I'm like barefoot all the time, and there's something about it. It's because I like that. Obviously, it's nicer to walk on grass, but even the warmth of the sun on the sidewalk. And my husband will laugh at me because I'll go out our front. We took all the grass out of the front and put native plants and wood chips, and I'll just like be walking across the wood chips, going ow, 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 and he's like, "What are you doing?" But there's something about that, like connecting, or to be a little bit literal, grounding,
Yes.
that like awakens something in a that it's like, yeah, awakens is the right word, I think. And it, like you talk about the birds being like an interruption and a gift. I don't know if you say interruption, but yeah, I think we need to be whispered to or encouraged to notice, and God is gracious to do that. So what lesson can you, well, I mean, we could just all read your books, but back to hope, because really that's the crux of the matter. Is so hard to hope. Like I especially feel like hope can be a painful thing, because to truly be hoping for something that you don't know the outcome. So I was about to say it's easy to hope in God. No, it's not. But it should be, because we have been promised. And when we rehearse the promises of God and the character of God and the goodness of God, He is a safe place to put our hope. That's what I'll say. Not easy, but safe. It's safe to hope in God because of who He is. But when we hope that our loved one will get well, or we will get the job, that kind of hope to me feels, it's more painful, don't you think? Just because it's not assured.
For sure. Hope is a very scary thing. And I write in looking up that to be alive is to grieve. Like there's no way around it. But to keep being alive is to hope. And some days that's all that it is here I am and I'm taking another breath. And that is my sign of hope. And hope in God is a certainty, but that doesn't mean it always feels like a certainty. It doesn't mean it always resonates with us as a certainty. And when we conflate hope in God with hope in certain outcomes in this life, we will be sorely disappointed because we are not promised ease. We are not promised comfort. I mean, we are promised comfort, but we are not promised, I think, the comfort we want, which is that everything will go the way we would like it to go.
Right.
And so what I learned in the writing of Looking Up really is that grief is its own pathway to hope because you can't rush your way there. Grief takes the time that it takes.
Yes.
And it will come up in different seasons in different ways. And some days we're fine and the next day we're crying in the grocery store aisle. You know, it is what it is. But by pressing in, by walking through, by facing it and not running from it or numbing it. We all need to numb a little sometimes. You get home from a long day and you're like, I'm going to watch a half an hour of that thing. That's fine. But over the long term, when we begin to face it down, what has surprised me in my own journey of grief is that there's a lightening to it over time. Like it
Hmm.
becomes infused with hope that is deeper and more lasting and more solid than the simple hope I had before the grief. Like
Yes.
it feels like earned hope in a way.
Yes. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and I have your book in front of me, and I circled and underlined. You wrote, "Hope is a long story."
Yes.
It's a long story. It's not. Yeah, you say maybe the natural world has balms to offer us in our suffering, even if it holds no cure.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I do. I know, like, for my grief, I'm 56 now, so I lost my father 26 years ago. And
Mm.
still, when the weather changes, because he got sick in autumn and was gone by December. And whenever the weather changes, even I'm never conscious of why my mood changes. has taken me less time as each year has passed to realize why all of a sudden I feel grouchy and anxious and dark. And it's just, there's like that scent in the air that my body remembers. And so, but like you said, so grief, it does get lighter. It doesn't go away. It's sort of, I don't think I made this up, but with grief, it's something, it's like losing a limb that it doesn't grow back. So when people say time heals all wounds, no, it doesn't heal all wounds. It teaches you, time teaches you how to live with the wound. And like you said, it strengthens our hope muscle. That's not how you put it, but that's what I heard. So
Yeah. No, that's it. And that is one of the many gifts of grief is we are different on the other side in ways that are painful and that ways that alter us forever, but also in many ways that make us more tender, help us to be better listeners, connect us to our communities, connect us to God. There are great gifts of grief and they're not gifts that most of us would choose, but they're great gifts nonetheless.
yeah. And I think that's one of the ways in which God makes good out of every sorrow. He works everything out toward the good. And there are ways to say that are terrible. You don't say that, within an hour of the person's miscarriage. Oh, God will make good. I remember when I had a miscarriage, people, well, at least you can get pregnant. I say, if with anyone who's grieving, don't start any sentence with at least, because I
Yep.
guarantee whatever you're about to say next is missing the point. Just sit there and yeah. And I think one of the best things to say to someone who's grieving is just, I don't know what to say. You have to just be honest and just sit. But it is still true that God works everything into good. That doesn't mean that the loss was good, but it's going back to that community. The reason that I know how to sit with someone who's grieving better than I used to is because of all the grief that I have held. I still wouldn't shoot, like you said. I'm not like, well, I'm sure glad my dad died young so that I know how to do that. Heck no. But yeah, but there's still something to see if you're paying attention, like how you pay attention to the bird. So do you have a bird, like a favorite bird? I won't tell. I won't tell the other birds.
It's just between us and everyone else
Yeah,
listening.
just between us.
Yeah, I have what's called a spark bird, which is the bird that got me into birding. People talk about their first spark bird, which is
Oh,
a
that's
black
the
phoebe.
term in the birding world. That's right. I
Well,
forgot it.
but that's not your favorite. That's just the bird that got you into it. So the bird that got me into it is a black phoebe. It's a little western flycatcher that lives in my backyard. But my very favorite bird is the song sparrow, and those are in all 50 states. I don't know if they're in Hawaii actually. I know they're in at least 49 states. They don't really migrate. They're small. They're brown. They're not that much to look at, but they keep singing no matter what else is going on. So in the rain, in the snow, in the sleet, in the hail, they keep raising their voices, and I find that very beautiful and inspiring as a pastor and a writer, keep using my voice.
That's actually the next chapter I'm about to get to is the
Yeah,
song sparrow. So
I love my sparrows. It's my one
yes.
and only tattoo.
Oh, that's great. I love that. Oh, I also, on a side note, I love all what do they call them? The communal terms, like a gulp of swallows.
The collectives, yeah.
The collective. I told my husband, I'm like, when I was reading your book, I'm like, do you know what a group of swallows is called? It's called a gulp. And he looked at me and he's like, you're kidding. And I'm like, no,
Someone had fun. Whoever put those together,
I love
that was a
those.
good
Yeah.
job. As a lover of language, I appreciate those very much.
Yes, etymology. I love
Yeah.
etymology. Well, I just want to thank you so much for spending some time with me and for writing this book. I told you in the quote unquote green room that I bought as soon as I started reading this book. I don't even think I was through the introduction and I went on bookshop.org and ordered 6 more copies. So I have 3 of them I have in mind who I'm giving them to, but I know that there will be other people. That it's just the way you write is so gentle and encouraging, and it's not spiritual bypassing, but it's also honest and encouraging. I already said encouraging. That's why I write. See, if I'd written that down, I could have backspaced and chosen a different word.
It was so
Anyway,
much better edited as well.
oh yes,
Solidarity. I just need a second pass at that. Yeah.
but the mockingbird, he just sings. He doesn't edit himself at all, right?
He should, but he does not.
He does not. Well, anyway, I thank you so much for spending the time with me, and I look forward to finishing the book and reading more of your books, and maybe we'll have you back on after your seasons book comes out. We'll chat. So,
I love that. Thank you so much for
yeah.
having me, Mandy. It's been a joy to
Yeah,
be with you.
wonderful. Okay, well, as you can tell, things are winding down here at the Anselm Society Digital Pub. The fire is down to embers, the customers are trundling home, and you've polished off your final glass. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. If you have a minute, we would love for you to rate and review the show on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.